Good morning. It is February 15th, 2013. It's 8:51 a.m. on the Pacific coast of North America. Today's discussion is going to include a bit of a rundown about the meteor asteroid DA14, 2012 DA14 official title, and its companions. I did indeed in January discuss that our data had shown that there were companions to DA14. We also had indications that there would be satellite disruption in January, and then again on the Immediacy Data Intelligence Report, I think yesterday, geez, it was a long day, yesterday I talked about the disruption that DA14 itself will make in the satellites as it goes through. Hopefully this Wujo will be uploaded and in place before it transits, because there may be some internet impact. But our data suggested GPS impact and the impact on the ability of boats to navigate. It may be military boats. So there likely will be military satellite damage as well. And just interesting, the data set that we used from the Space Go Farts entity that suggested that there were companions to DA14 from early January that triggered into the talk, I think, in late January about DA14 and its impact on satellites. That data set is still growing, still forecasting more issues with unknown crud from space coming our way. Now, in a more reportorial mode, I've gotten off of a Skype call with some internet acquaintances in Russia, and in spite of my limited Russian alphabet or Russian vocabulary, we were able to get some intelligence across Skype. This one fellow has just a really seriously thick accent, and I have apparently a notoriously terrible American accent, and so we were just at cross communication continuously. However, the poor fellow is a friend of a friend, and he was put onto a Skype call by his buddy, and she had a long story. Traveling companions were apparently caught in the afflicted area, in one of the areas in which the meteor passed over, and there was relatively minimal damage, so it was at its lower trajectory, but long before impact. And so at the leading edge of the damage, so to speak, and this guy was on the 4th floor of a apartment block, and he ended up having the windows were all smashed in, and he was sleeping such that he was showered with very cold, sharp glass, and it's heavy glass. It's almost a safety glass, and so it cut him very deeply all over his face, and they had to take him to the hospital. And he has a fairly good-sized gash on one arm where a chunk of the glass that was attached to some wire came back and sliced him. But other than lacerations from which he will recover, he's doing okay. The car that they drove there apparently was flattened. It was parked outside the building, and he said it was like a giant snowball just came in, sat on it. The top of the car was pushed in, caved in. It wasn't a very sturdy car, and really old Fiat. The engine, he said, was just pushed down so far that it's outside the mounts and everything are just crushed out in the engine compartment, and the hood's all caved in. He said very much like giant buttocks sat on his car and just sort of, made their own little couch kind of an indent on the metal, and so it's totally useless. And he said there were about 40 cars in the car park there, and most of them were damaged. Those that were further away from the building, which would imply that they were more to the south east, were the least damaged, and those that were on the opposite side of the building that were snugged up against the building, more or less, fairly close, they weren't damaged at all. So the passage was such that whatever the gravity wave or force wave was, the building itself protected cars on the other side of it for some distance. The fellow I was talking to in Russia I think his real name's Rupert, but he goes by Rudy. But anyway, Rudy was, I don't think he likes Rupert for a lot of reasons. But anyway, Rudy was quite excited. Also a little bit slightly out of it from whatever drugs they'd given him for the pain. But he was telling me that he was very aware of what was going on as he was leaving the building, and they were taking him to the hospital. Tonya, the woman he's traveling with, who was staying, they were both staying with her friends there, took him to the local infirmary, and from there they went to the hospital. He got stitched up, and then they came back. And they both reported that the gravity wave, or whatever it was stopped by the building. And that's why the building took apparently the brunt of it as the meteorite passed over all the windows and everything, and including or were caved in on that side of the building, and then also the portico suffered damage. I don't know to what extent, because that was the main entrance on that side. The back side of the building and that car park were relatively unscathed. Anyway, Rudy's quite excited. There's all kinds of damage. He said there was a huge swath of disturbance that you could see in the fields in the snow, and you could see areas where, as they were driving along, where the trees had been impacted and all the snow and ice had been knocked off, and a lot of branches had been knocked off. So the gravity wave was of some considerable force, whatever the size of the object was that was passing actually over his head at that point. And Tonya was saying that she was in an inner room that has a very small window on the backside of the building, and the first clue she had of anything was the whole building shook. And then she said the room she was in was bathed in light, as though somebody was outside, and suddenly had gone up 4 floors and was shining in a giant floodlight in her room. And it was quite extraordinary. She actually thought it was a nuclear explosion because of the amount of light coming. And then everything got quiet really quick. And it was that point she said that all of the creaks and groans and cracks and splinterings and all the other noise became evident. And so she thinks that for a period of time, and she doesn't know how long, maybe 5, 10, 30 seconds, something, she was actually affected mentally in the sense and was not able to register sound, because she said it came flooding back into her as though all of a sudden her hearing had returned. I think she's in like maybe her mid-20s, very healthy young woman. She's one of those strange Russian extreme sports kind of people, and she does all the high climbing and is what's known as a balance artist. She does extreme balancing on the ends of bridges and stuff. Has a website with all kinds of interesting photos that she's taken. Anyway, though, so the reports from Russia were that the passage was quite extraordinary, and in its wake, Tonya was saying the air seemed very different somehow, and that her head was distinctly affected in terms of, she said, her brain felt differently, as though there may have been some electrical component to this, and an electrical or gravity wave that also impacted her. So quite interesting in terms of that aspect of it. Now, if that data set is accurate, then when DA14 continues through and passes through, a number of the satellites are going to be impacted. And not to say that they're going to be struck by the object, but the drag, so to speak, the gravity effects of this object as it passes through may be the cause of what was described in the data as basically satellite disarray, GPS satellites being gone wonky, and some satellites destroyed, although it wasn't really specific as to which ones would go. There were also suggestions from the data that we would lose GPS, at least in some regions, and that this would cause disruptions in navigation and problems with ships and not being able to dock and find their way, and airplanes and such. All the people that rely on GPS will be affected by this, assuming that the data set actually was prescient and it plays out as described in the set and in the discussion that I put out in the immediacy data report of the 14th. As I say, it's been a long day. Yesterday, about 20-hour day, and didn't get much sleep on top of that, and then was talking with Russia early this morning. So very interesting. The impact stream showing Australia, Japan, Cuba, and Russia suggests that there were 3 companions. We had at least 2 showing. One over Cuba was relatively small, apparently, so the 2 large ones were Japan and Russia. If accurate, then this data set is also suggesting that whatever level of damage we sustain in our satellite system now is an echo for what will occur later on in the year in 2 more phases. So that would suggest that we're going to get a March-April phase of satellite destruction, and then, not that we'll care much because apparently the global coastal event happens before then, but then sometime in November, late November, early December, we get another wave of satellites being knocked about by space crud, just according to our data set. Not that it's really accurate. However, gotta say it picked up the companions, and that was unknown to me until I ran into the information in the data set. Now it's been proven to be accurate. We did not, by the way, have any in January any sure and certain knowledge that any of the companions would hit, but we in the data set and the description in January, I should have kind of like clued into it. It was a well done moment for me, because now it's obvious. How would we have known that there were companions unless they had hit the planet or in some way caused damage that was visible, or had been scooting through the sky and left trails? So in other words, we had to have some level of visibility on the companions, and that obviously in the media we have that now. And see, that's really the issue with our approach here, is it doesn't forecast events, it forecasts the discussion about events, and we have to infer and interpret a lot of things from that. So in January, I should have been able to make the inference that, oh, well, they're going to cause some level of damage, because obviously that's the only way they could get visibility. But there was a lot of stuff in those January intelligence reports, and I don't have much time in this format to really go into it in any event. So it's sort of an excusable error, but an error nonetheless. Now, the rest of this talk is basically going to be focused on the DA-14 and its repercussions on the satellite system, because the suggestion was within the data that we would see internet impacts. Some of the satellites are thrown about and there's problems. And then further, we will see the GPS issues with the boats going wonky. Now, the reason that this is particularly important has less to do with the impacts on a day-to-day basis thereafter, although they will have continuing problems resulting from the loss of these satellites. The issue for us is the level of prescience involved. If, for instance, we do indeed show that there's, or discover, because it might take us some time. If it's a military satellite, they wouldn't necessarily tell us right off. But if we do indeed discover that there has been satellite damage from DA-14, then the time to pay attention will be in late March, early April, when the data suggests that some other asteroid or meteor is going to come on through and cause a whole lot more damage. This would impact us in a way that many people are not necessarily aware of, and that's with the just-in-time ordering system. So it would be a situation of where, and we may even see some of those effects if DA-14 causes the satellite damage now. We may see some small impacts in regional areas where all of a sudden the just-in-time ordering system does not function. And you will notice that on places like gas stations, convenience stores, major food stores, all of these places, they've all got these satellite dishes everywhere. And these small satellite dishes are their communications link to their ordering system. And basically, it's a situation of where we're lucky if we've got 1 to 2 days worth of goods on any level of a shelf, in terms of goods that are of a use in an immediate fashion. Of course, there are things on the shelves like nails in big box stores that are not going to be demanded upon in a crisis instantly. Nails was a bad choice. You might really need those. But, something, flower bulbs, you wouldn't necessarily need flower bulbs. And so flower bulbs might sit around in the big box stores for a number of days. However, something like nails or plastic or duct tape might be gone within a day or two, simply because there's not that much depth in the stocking system, and they rely upon this automatic ordering system where